My son-in-law told me, in front of my daughter and both of his parents, that a man like me had no business holding onto a property worth that kind of money. He used the word holding like I was hoarding something that belonged to someone else, like I was a squatter in my own life. My name is Walter. Wait, that's taken. Let me back up. My son stood in the doorway of my garage on a Tuesday afternoon and told me I was embarrassing him. Not in those exact words. He never used exact words when a vague one would do more damage. What he actually said was, "Dad, Renata's parents keep asking questions about the ranch, and honestly, I don't know what to tell them." I was elbow deep in a carburetor at the time. I looked up at him, wiped my hands on a shop rag, and said, "Tell them it's mine." He didn't laugh. He just stood there in his pressed chinos and his firm's logo polo, looking at me the way you look at a piece of furniture you're trying to figure out how to get rid of. His name is Cole. My son, Cole Merritt, 31 years old, junior partner at an accounting firm in Dallas, engaged to a woman named Renata whose parents own 3 car dealerships and a strip mall in Plano. Nice people, the Delgados. Ambitious in the way that makes other people feel like obstacles. Cole had been acting different for about 8 months before that Tuesday, ever since the engagement. Ever since Renata's father, Miguel, had started coming around and asking pointed questions about the land situation and long-term asset planning. Miguel Delgado was not a subtle man. He wore a Rolex on one wrist and a Fitbit on the other, and he talked about real estate the way some men talk about hunting, like it was always about dominance. What they knew about me: I was 58 years old. I drove a 2009 Chevy Colorado that needed a new exhaust pipe. I wore the same 3 flannels in rotation and bought my boots at Tractor Supply. I had spent 30 years working as what my son had recently started describing to people as a property manager, which I suppose was accurate in the same way that calling the ocean some water is accurate. What they did not know: almost everything else. I bought my first piece of land in 1994, 47 acres outside of Fredericksburg, Texas, for $210,000. A foreclosure. The previous owner had let the irrigation go to ruin and the fencing collapse, and nobody else at the auction wanted to deal with it. I did. I fixed the irrigation myself, rebuilt the fencing over 2 summers, planted a small vineyard on the east slope, and leased the rest to a neighboring cattle operation. By 2001, it was cash flowing. By 2006, I had used it to buy 4 more parcels. I kept going. I kept my mouth shut. I kept my truck. Cole knew I owned the ranch. 340 acres in the Texas Hill Country, where he'd grown up riding dirt bikes and complaining about the heat. He knew I owned a small rental house in Kerrville that I'd picked up in 2008. He had never once, in 31 years, asked me a single question about how any of it worked. Renata's parents had, though, and somewhere between their questions and Cole's desire to seem like a man whose family had things figured out, a plan had formed. I just didn't know the details yet. I found out on a Friday evening in March. Cole called and asked if he could bring Renata and her parents over for dinner on Saturday. I said of course. I drove to H-E-B, bought a brisket, started the smoker at 4 in the morning. Renata was a good woman. I want to be clear about that. She was sharp, she was kind to me in a genuine way, and I don't think she knew what was about to happen any more than I did. Miguel Delgado arrived in a black Cadillac Escalade, shook my hand too firmly, and immediately started walking the property like he was appraising it. His wife, Sylvia, was pleasant and mostly stayed on the porch with Renata. Cole followed his future father-in-law around with his hands in his pockets, nodding at things Miguel pointed to. We ate dinner. The brisket was good. Everybody said so. Then Miguel folded his hands on the table and said, "So, the ranch." I looked at him. "What about it?" "Cole tells me you've been thinking about your long-term situation. At your age, a property this size must be a real burden to maintain." I hadn't told Cole I was thinking about any long-term situation. I said so. Cole cut in. "Dad, we've talked about this." We had not talked about this. I said that too. The table got quiet. Renata was looking at Cole. Sylvia was looking at her plate. Miguel was looking at me with the expression of a man who had expected less pushback. "Look," Miguel said, "I'm going to be direct with you. This land is an asset. Right now it's sitting here not being optimized. Cole and Renata are going to need to establish themselves. A property like this, in the right hands, could form the foundation of something real." "The right hands," I said. "People who understand land development. We've been looking at the corridor between here and Fredericksburg. There's serious commercial interest in this whole region right now. Hospitality, agritourism, boutique development." I looked at my son. "Cole, is this why you invited me to dinner?" Cole had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Dad, I just think we should have a conversation about the future. You're almost 60. You can't run this place forever. And Renata and I." "You what?" He squared his shoulders. We think it would make sense to transfer ownership now, before probate becomes an issue. We'd make sure you're taken care of. You could stay in the house as long as you need to. Stay in the house as long as I need to. In a house I'd owned for 26 years. Miguel nodded, like this was all very reasonable. It's a good deal for everyone. We get the land into a trust, start moving on permits, and you don't have to worry about upkeep anymore. What makes you think I'm worried about upkeep? A place this size. The fencing alone. I know what the fencing costs, I said. I've been paying for it since before Cole could drive. Sylvia touched her husband's arm. He ignored her. Think about what you could do with the liquidity, he said. You could buy something smaller, more manageable. We'd handle the transfer costs. I looked around the table, my son staring at the brisket. His fiancée, clearly wishing she was somewhere else. Two people I had met 6 times, trying to explain to me what I should do with 30 years of my life. I picked up my fork. Let me think about it, I said. Cole's shoulders dropped with relief. Miguel smiled. We finished dinner. They drove back to Dallas. I washed the dishes and sat on the porch for a long time, listening to the coyotes out past the east fence line. Then I went inside and made some phone calls. The first call was to my attorney, a woman named Frances, who had handled my real estate transactions for 18 years. It was late, but she picked up. She always picked up. Frances, I said, I need you to pull the full portfolio documentation. Everything. Current valuations, entity structure, the works. How fast? I've got a situation developing. She was quiet for a second. How bad? My son just tried to talk me into signing over the ranch. Oh, a pause. I'll have everything ready by Monday. Second call was to my operations manager, a man named Stewart who had been running the day-to-day on my properties for 11 years. I told him I might need to move quickly on a couple of things and to keep his schedule clear. Third call I made the next morning to a man named Clifford Bain at Cornerstone Ranch Brokers in Austin. Clifford and I had done business for a long time. I told him I had 2 properties I wanted to list quietly, and I wanted him to have buyers ready before anything went public. How quietly? He asked. No MLS, private network only, and I need speed. 2 weeks, maybe 3. You sure about this? I'm sure, I said. Cole called me the following Wednesday to ask if I'd had time to think things over. I told him I was still considering. I asked if he and Renata might want to come back out the following weekend. I was thinking of having a small gathering, some old friends, and I'd like for them to be there. He said, sure. He sounded pleased. He probably thought I was warming up to the idea. I was not warming up to the idea. I was giving myself 10 days to get my paperwork in order and let Clifford do his work. The gathering was on a Saturday. 11 people total. My neighbor Hap and his wife, my accountant Jim, Frances and her husband, a few others who'd known me for 20 or 30 years. Cole and Renata arrived together. About 40 minutes later, Miguel and Sylvia pulled in, which I had not invited them to do, which meant Cole had. I didn't say anything about that. We had burgers on the grill. Everybody was easy and comfortable, the way people get when they've known each other long enough that nobody has to perform. Cole spent most of the first hour orbiting Miguel, laughing at things he said. Renata sat with Frances for a while and seemed to genuinely enjoy herself. I noticed that, after dinner, Miguel maneuvered us toward the porch while the others drifted inside for dessert. Cole was there. Renata had gone to help Sylvia bring out pie. Miguel put his hands in his pockets and looked out at the land. Beautiful place, he said. Be ashamed to let it just sit. It doesn't sit, I said. It works. Sure. But you know what I mean. The potential here. He turned to me. Have you given any more thought to what we discussed? And? Cole said. Dad, we really think this is the right move. For everybody. For everybody, I repeated. Tell me something, Cole. Do you know what this property generates in a year? He looked at me. You lease the grazing rights, and the vineyard produces, what, a few thousand cases? Guess again. He shifted. I don't know, Dad. That's kind of the point. You never talk about any of this stuff. You never asked. Miguel stepped in. Whatever the current income stream, the real value is in the development potential. That's where we can really. What do you think the land alone is worth? I asked him. Miguel glanced at Cole. In today's market, for hill country acreage with water rights and a structure like this, maybe 2.5, maybe 3 million. For the ranch, I said. Right. I nodded. I went inside and came back with a folder. I set it on the porch railing between us. Miguel picked it up. He opened it. He went still. Cole stepped over and looked. His face changed. The folder held 3 things. The current Cornerstone Brokers valuation on the ranch, $4.1 million. The portfolio summary from Frances's office, and a 1-page overview of a holding company called Hill Country Heritage Properties, LLC. What is this? Cole said. That's what I own. Miguel was reading the portfolio summary. His finger moved down the page. He stopped somewhere near the bottom. These are all yours, all mine. Cole took the folder from his future father-in-law. He read it differently, slower, going back to certain lines. Dad, this says you own 18 properties. 21 now. I picked up 3 in the Kerrville area last year. Good prices, needed work, 21. Cole's voice dropped. What's the total? Frances had stepped out onto the porch without me noticing. She had a way of doing that. As of last week's updated valuations, she said, the Hill Country Heritage portfolio carries a market value of approximately $14.3 million, with net annual income across all properties of around $840,000. The porch was very quiet. Miguel set down his wine. Cole stared at the folder like it was in a language he almost spoke. $840,000 a year, he said. Good years, I said. Some years less. 22 was a good year. Why didn't you ever? Cole stopped. Started again. Dad, why did you let me think you were just barely getting by? I never said I was barely getting by. You drive a 15-year-old truck. I like that truck. You buy your clothes at Tractor Supply. Good boots, I said. You can't argue with the boots. Renata had come out at some point. She was standing near the door, holding a plate of pie nobody was eating anymore. Miguel found his voice. Well, he straightened his shoulders. The Rolex caught the porch light. This changes things considerably. If the portfolio is this developed, we could, Miguel, I said. I want to make sure we're clear on something. I took the folder back from Cole. 3 weeks ago, you sat at my table and told me this land was a burden, that I should transfer it to the younger generation before I became a problem, that you'd make sure I was taken care of. He opened his mouth. I'm not finished, I said. Not loud, just clear. My son nodded along and told me I couldn't run this place forever. You offered to cover my moving costs. You told me I could stay in my own house as long as I needed to. The porch was so quiet I could hear the windmill turning out by the barn. I listened to all of that, I said. And then I made some calls. Cole looked up. What kind of calls? Clifford, I said. From inside the house, Clifford Bain stepped out onto the porch. He was holding a manila envelope. Cole's face went white. Clifford handles my brokerage relationships, I said. He's been very busy the last 2 weeks. Clifford set the envelope on the railing. Purchase agreement, executed this morning. The ranch, main parcel 3 40 acres, structures included, sold to a buyer group out of San Antonio for $4.2 million, cash. 15-day close. Renata made a sound. And the Kerrville house, I said. The one Cole knows about. That went to a young couple from Austin on Tuesday. They've been looking for a starter rental in that area for 2 years. Good people. Cole's voice came out strange. You sold the ranch. I did, Dad. Where are we supposed to? He stopped himself. Where are you supposed to what? He didn't answer. He was looking at Clifford's envelope like it might disappear if he stared at it long enough. Miguel's jaw was tight. Tom, this is? He caught himself using the wrong name. This is a rash decision. You're letting emotion drive a $14 million portfolio. I'm letting clarity drive it, I said. You came to my home and told me what I should do with property I've spent 30 years building. You assumed that because I drive an old truck and shop at Tractor Supply, I must need saving. That's not a negotiating position, Miguel. That's a miscalculation. Sylvia put her hand on her husband's arm. This time he let her. Cole sat down on the porch steps. He was quiet for a long time. The others drifted back inside. Frances gave me a small nod on her way past. Clifford shook my hand and left. Eventually it was just Cole and me and the sound of the land settling into evening. I didn't know, Cole said. He wasn't making an excuse, just stating it. I know you didn't. Why didn't you ever tell me? I sat down on the step beside him. Not something I'd planned to do, but it felt right. Because you never asked, Cole. Not once in 31 years did you ask me what I did with my days or how any of this worked. You maced up a story about me. Decent guy, limited means, got lucky with a piece of land, and you just kept telling yourself that story. He was quiet. And somewhere along the way, I said, that story started to feel like a problem that needed solving. Cole put his elbows on his knees and looked out at the pasture. The last of the light was going orange on the cedar and the live oak, and the fence posts I'd put in myself 20 years ago. Did you sell it because of me? He asked. Or because of Miguel? I sold it because the moment somebody tells you that you should give up what you've built so they can optimize it, you find out pretty fast who they think they're talking to. I looked at him, and I needed you to find out who you were talking to. He didn't say anything for a while. Then Renata didn't know. I could tell. She's going to be upset. She seems like someone who can handle being upset. Cole almost smiled. Almost. What are you going to do with $14 million? 13.4, after the 2 I kept in operating reserves. And the same thing I've always done. Buy something broken and fix it. Probably a stretch of land up near Mason that came on the market last month. Good water, bad fencing. My kind of thing. He shook his head slowly, not angry anymore, something else. Something more like a man recalibrating. I told Renata's dad you were basically retired, he said. I know. I told him you probably lived off the grazing lease and some savings. I know that too. I'm sorry, Dad. I looked at him. My son. 31 years old, sitting on my porch steps in his chinos, looking like he'd been handed something heavy and wasn't sure yet whether to put it down or carry it. I know you are, I said. We sat there until it got dark. Renata came out eventually and sat on Cole's other side without saying anything. The three of us watched the stars come out over the hill country, which is something worth watching if you ever get the chance. Cole called me a week later. He wanted to know if I'd be willing to walk him through the portfolio. Not to ask for anything, he said. Just to understand it. To understand how it worked. I said yes. He drove out on a Saturday. No Escalade in the driveway this time. Just his own car, a 4-year-old Accord that I'd never paid much attention to, but that I noticed now, because it occurred to me he'd been driving it for 4 years without upgrading. Maybe there was more of me in him than I'd given him credit for. We sat at the kitchen table for 4 hours. I showed him the acquisition records going back to '94, the duplex in Fredericksburg, the 7 years of reinvestment before I took a single dollar out as income, the spreadsheet Stewart kept, updated weekly, tracking every property's cash flow and maintenance costs and projected capital needs. Cole asked good questions, careful questions, the kind of questions I would have asked. Around noon I made sandwiches and we ate, and he said, I told Miguel what the portfolio was worth. After that night, how'd he take it? He said you were foolish to sell the ranch. Cole paused. He also asked if there were other properties available through your broker. I laughed. It surprised me. The laugh came up before I could think about it. Cole looked startled, then laughed too. We sat there in the kitchen laughing about Miguel Delgado trying to buy my properties after attempting to take them, and for a minute, it was good. It was just good. I'm going to tell Renata's family less, Cole said when we'd settled back down. About financial stuff, about us. That's probably wise, and I want to learn this. He gestured at the table, at the files. Not to take over anything, just to understand what you built. I nodded. You could have told me before all this happened, he said. Not accusing, just honest. I could have, I said. I kept waiting for you to ask. He thought about that. Fair, he said finally. That was 3 months ago. Cole comes out most weekends now. Sometimes Renata comes with him. She asks better questions than her father, and she's not afraid of silence, which is something I've always respected in a person. They're getting married in October. Smaller ceremony than originally planned, which I also respect. I bought the land near Mason, 280 acres, 2 broken stock tanks, fencing that made me genuinely sad to look at. I've been out there 4 mornings a week with a post driver and a waterline diagram, working through it the same way I've worked through everything. One piece at a time, no rush, no announcement. Miguel Delgado did reach out to Clifford. Clifford was polite, nothing came of it. The morning after Cole and I had our long conversation at the kitchen table, I drove out to the Mason property before sunrise. It was cold the way November mornings in Texas get cold. Not brutal, just awake. I parked the truck on the ridge above the east tank and watched the sky go from black to gray to that thin particular blue that comes just before the sun shows up. I've built a lot of things in my life that nobody knew were mine until they needed to be. I don't regret any of it. Not the building, not the silence, and not the moment I decided that some lessons are better demonstrated than explained.